September of 2020, I was really, really deep in my disease, in the disease of alcoholism.
Record so there's a thin bullshit. You're drunk.
At that time, I was drinking 6 days a week, I would say, between 14 and 18 beers a night in a 2-hour window of time.
Here's the reality of my drinking. It's in 1 hour. And that's what I've had to drink in the last hour. And that's how I prefer to drink, by the way. By a long shot. Drinking is extremely stressful for me around anyone. I think the only time I enjoy it is if I'm like alone. Yeah.
I have a long history of alcoholism. That's not what we're going to discuss in this video, but just know that at that point, September 2020, I was very much hitting at the pinnacle of my disease in terms of how it manifested in my life, how it impacted my thoughts, how it impacted my feelings, my perceptions, my emotions, and my physical body, among other things.
Later in the night, I got my food. So normally I drink, very unusual, but I get drunk and then I fucking McDonald's. Fuck me.
Something I was battling in September was this thought that I was never going to be able to get sober, ever. And I've been trying to get sober since I was 19 years old, and very seriously trying to get sober since mid-20s, let's say. My story is riddled with countless attempts, some success and some progress in terms of learning how to be sober, learning how to live a life of recovery, but then ultimately with endless repeat relapses that have led to increasingly more difficult circumstances and a lot more pain.
If I play my cards right, this is the last night I'll ever be drunk, alone, downstairs while my beautiful wife is upstairs.
More despair, more consequences, more progression of the disease. And that led me to this breaking point in September. So in my head, with what I just said about not being sure if I would ever get sober, having those thoughts, those warped perceptions that perhaps I'd crossed some invisible line and I was never going to have a chance to really be sober.
It's not easy being an alcoholic. Because you don't mean to drink when you drink. You don't. In your mind, you know you're an alcoholic and you know you shouldn't drink. And you know that you can't help yourself. Eventually, you're gonna need to drink again. And you don't know when you're gonna drink again. And you don't know necessarily how much you're gonna drink or what you're gonna do when you're drinking. And that's scary. And that's not easy because, I hope I don't do anything crazy. I hope I don't do anything too stupid. Because I just don't know when I'm going to drink or when I'm not going to drink. So it doesn't discriminate either. I've got a good family. I made a good living off YouTube, but I might tear it all down by accident because I can't stop drinking. I love you, Jess. That's my wife. I love her. I feel bad for her.
I was starting to wonder if it made more sense to accept that alcohol was going to be a part of my life till my ending days. What do I do about that reality, which very much seemed like what was happening to me? Every time I tried to stop drinking, it would pull me in closer, pull me in tighter. I was lost in a cycle of relapse that I didn't even understand. And so with that thought came this aggressive an ultimately very sad and tragic conclusion within my mind, which was that I needed to separate from my wife and ultimately divorce from her. I needed to free her of me. It had been increasingly difficult for me to come home and look her in the eye in such a broken state.
I've been in relapse mode for like a month. And I feel like it's starting to come to a head. Last night I drank and Jessie just couldn't keep her cool about it. And I don't blame her. It just is what it is, but she just said some shit. She was like, you just gotta rehab for God's sake, and just made me feel bad, but it also made me want to drink more, and it made me want to isolate, made me want to just be alone. Mm-hmm. It's like, I know I'm fucked up. I know this is a defective part of me. And now I just feel like detaching, which sucks for her. I'm just like, no one wants to be seen in their ugliest form, you know?
She's been with me for a lot of years. I haven't really talked about Jess in a while, but Jessie's been with me since I was 21 barely, and I'm 34 now, 33 at the time of this story. But my being able to stay sober has been a constant narrative in our relationship. When I'm sober and in recovery, there's hope. When I'm not, there's just sadness, lack of hope, and no real vision for the future. And it's been really, really tough on our relationship. And leading up to September 2020, I was feeling more desperate in my addiction, more out of control, more scared, more lonely, and more addicted than ever before. Every day I would try not to drink, but I was just so lost and so deep in that spiral. And I would come home and I would look at her and she would look at me and she would see me with those sad eyes and she would know that I was going to be drinking. And I would look at her with my sad eyes. And I would have a gym bag full of alcohol every night. And she would just look at me and I would kind of just look at her and she'd sometimes say, like, are you going to be drinking tonight? And I would just sort of bob my head up and down. Because I knew I was, and I knew I couldn't stop, and I didn't know how, and I didn't know what was happening, and I didn't think I was ever going to be able to stop. And so I would just sometimes whimper in front of her and shake my head, and I would look to the floor, and just any semblance of who I really was just diminished and washed away. And she would just look at me in this sad, pathetic state, and that became normal at the end of my drinking. And it was very uncomfortable because all I wanted to do was be free. All I wanted to do was be available to my wife and to myself, but I wasn't. And every bit of my brain and my chemistry and my instinct was to try to get back to my next drink. And so that became so normal and so debilitating emotionally and so heartbreaking that I started to contemplate if it was best to separate and divorce from her, to free her, because I didn't believe I was ever going to be able to get sober. I had just done rehab in January already. But it's the only thing I could think to set her free. So this is a heartbreaking story. I was at the gym. I had just finished a big workout. I always did those hungover, brutally hungover, mind you. So I detoxed. I was sitting there on the ground next to a dear friend named Chase. And I admitted something to Chase that I had never admitted to anybody before. Chase is one of my closest friends. He's a faith-based man, and he's a very, very consistent and congruent man in terms of living to his values and being loving and accepting. I had just a moment of clarity, to be honest, about something that I hadn't necessarily planned on telling anyone. And I said to him that I'm thinking about what I just said, that I don't know if I should still be with her, that it's not fair to her, and that I was thinking about just separating, selling the house or whatever, and just moving away and living somewhere alone and just conceding to my disease and just accepting that as my life. And he looked at me with the most stern, secure, loving, but firm eyes and said no. He just said no. He told me that wasn't the answer and that wasn't acceptable. And he reminded me that this was the woman who pledged her life to me and whose life I pledged to her through better or worse. And he reminded me that we were one flesh now, and that no matter what, walking away from her to ease my own guilt, to ease my own sorrow and my own sadness was not an answer. And it wasn't going to fix anything, and it wasn't going to save her, and it wasn't going to save me. I can't exactly remember all the things he said to me that night, but the ultimate message was that we were one flesh, and that we were to stand by one another no matter what, and that I needed to fight, and I needed to hold on, and I needed to not walk away. And I remember my eyes filled with tears because I was just so lost and so hopeless. But that was the last time I thought about separating or divorcing the woman I love. That was the last time that ever crossed my mind. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how I was going to get sober. I didn't know what the right call would be. But I stopped thinking that was the right solution. And shortly after, I checked into rehab for the third time, the program I'm still in, that I graduate in less than 3 weeks now. And today I feel closer to my wife, Jessie, than ever before. And I have more hope in my heart for our marriage and for my recovery than ever before. And there's a lot of reasons that I have this chance again to be sober and to try again. But one of them definitely was that night, talking to my friend Chase and listening to his words and remembering, just for a split second, remembering who I really was. Because that's one of the sad, tragic things about addiction, and certainly how it's manifested in my life, is that I lose track of the real me, and I can barely hear his voice. I can barely see him. That addicted me, that disease state me was 100% driving the vehicle. And you would get these little moments of clarity, these little moments of honesty, these little moments of reason, very small and fleeting. And that was one of them for me, was to admit that I was having these crazy thoughts of leaving the greatest, most precious thing in my life, who I adore more than anything, and who'd stuck with me through everything, and who was still standing by me. Even when I said that, she wasn't threatening me or anything like that. She was loving me and trying to help me. So I thought it was important that I share that, because it's not how I think or feel today. My perception is on more solid ground now, and I have a real chance at a real life, and I have a real chance at a real marriage again. So Chase, I know you're watching this. Thank you for being that voice of reason for me. And thank you guys for letting me share this story. It was a pivotal moment for me, and I have no doubt that it helped save my life. And so shout out to everyone who's willing to be honest with their friends about what they're really going through, or their family. And shout out to friends and family and people who are willing to be firm and be honest, and not co-sign insanity, but to encourage and to promote strength and fortitude and hope and healing and all of that, because that's what Chase did for me. And I think it's important, because I can't always see straight, and I still can't. So I love having people in my life, in my recovery life, and my regular life, that can help me when I need help, that can steer me straight, and it affords me an opportunity to do the same. So in the comment section, if you feel so inspired, share a little bit about yourself. If this story resonated with you, whatever comes to mind is great. Just know that the more honest you can be, the better for all of us. And just know that I'm well today. My marriage is healing and doing really, really well, all things considered. And I appreciate you guys. And Chase, I appreciate you. And I can't wait to see, this is a message directly for Chase, but I just can't wait to see where our friendship goes in sobriety. My friends have really held me close and not let me go, even in my addiction. And so it's been really nice to get to know them again in my sobriety. Okay, that's my story. See you guys in the next video. Adios.